A mental health disorder may be a part of who we are, but it is never all that we are. Sometimes you just need a hug. No words of advice, no outpouring of empathy. Just a hug. Be kind, be compassionate, and be good to one another.
Hey everybody, it's Mama Deb, and we are back for another edition of Let's Get Real About Mental Health. Hope everybody's doing well. We're going to take a few moments here to let a few more people join us, and then I'll get into the really exciting research that I did this week. At least I'm very excited about it. I don't know how many of you will be, but I think actually going to see the importance and the strides that we're making um, towards really finding a way to manage our mental health. So, yeah. So, excuse the Halloween decorations. I'm still too lazy to have taken them down. It might not happen till after Thanksgiving. I know I'm a rebel, right? All right, everybody. So it is a very cold day here in Oregon. I think our high was 48 degrees. I'm sitting in my garage freezing with a heater tucked underneath my table so that my feet are at least warm. So tonight we talked about, I titled this episode as Research, Regroup, and Remind, because there's some new research on the horizon. Well, the research has been done, so it means that we're going to have some new advancements in mental health, which is amazing. And then we're going to regroup and look at maybe change the way that we look at our mental health disorders in order to approach our doctors in a different way so that they will begin to understand a little more about what is going on with us and a better way to approach diagnosing our mental health disorders. And we're going to do a little reminder about how we need to be fair to ourselves during the holiday season. So let me get started. So, um, the World Health Organization, or WHO, has conducted a survey or a research project, and it is called the WHO's Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan. And they actually implemented it in 2013 and now have made changes to take it forward to 2030. The changes that they made were instrumental in was actually instrumental. The pandemic was instrumental in changing the research because they found that in when they before the pandemic, we did not have the mental health disorders were running rampant anyway, and without recognition or treatment being very individualized. It was absolutely just across the board. Let's try this. Let's try that. And we've now figured out, thanks to the World Health Organization, that we are not going to be able to do that anymore. We're going to have to start being our doctor's going to start having to be a little bit more specific and talking to the person and doing some more testing on them to get a better plan together on the best way to treat their mental health disorders. So since the pandemic has happened, the World Health Organization has estimated that between 26 and 28% increase in mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, anger issues, as well as maybe even some issues like bulimia or anorexia. 26 to 28% of the populace that has increased that much. That is a boat ton of people, y'all. When we look at it worldwide, we're talking about. And what they found is that the more times that more time that people were locked into a home, or a place together with people who were in their lives, but now they couldn't get away from them. And I know that sounds terrible if you're a married couple, but you do need individual space and time. And you couldn't get away from them. And those who stayed at home and took over the household were now, their routines were interrupted, and they weren't able to do things the way they wanted to be done because the other person was in the household. It created a new type of anxiety, and especially showed a rampant increase in children, because children were being told you can't go outside and go into the fresh air and play because there are all these germs about. And when you do that to a young child, you have now created an entire generation of anxiety and a possible agoraphobia, because it doesn't go away. You can't just tell a child who's learned, oh, I can't go outside because it's dangerous, to, okay, today it's done. The government says the pandemic's over, so now you can go outside and play. It doesn't work that way. Our mental health is absolutely affected deeply when it comes to these kinds of things. So the um, the comprehensive call to, I'm sorry, the mental health plan of action by the World Health Organization basically says that we need to. The main goal is to decrease discrimination, stamina, and violation of human rights on those who have mental health disorders. Because during the pandemic, when we weren't able to do things the way that we usually do, it strongly affected those of us who have mental health disorders, who rely on a routine to make sure that everything flows right for us and is all right and good in our worlds. Especially those of us, even though autism is not considered a mental health disorder, those who have autism and were no longer allowed to um, do their routine or see their behavioral therapists in the way they used to be, it created a huge amount of mental health disorders for them. Like I said, autism itself is not a mental health disorder, but it did create depression, anxiety, and almost, they're saying now, to maybe to the lean towards bipolar disorder and or schizophrenia in people that were no longer allowed to maintain their schedules and their ways of doing things because of the pandemic. So the call for plan of action is specifically saying that we need to get a it doesn't have to be specialized now, but a non-specialized healthcare provider to be available in every level of healthcare, meaning doctor's visits, meaning psychiatry, meaning OBGYN, meaning pediatrics. Every level of healthcare has to have training in how to recognize mental health disorders so that they can get these patients as soon as possible to the right type of therapy and testing that must be done in order to diagnose these disorders in a much more effective manner than what we have seen in the past. So what they're calling for is they're calling for the healthcare system to recognize that one size does not fit all. There are so many different types of mental health disorders. And let's take depression, for instance. Depression is one that runs rampant. It's actually like the number one cause of disability in the world is depression. So if you look at depression, you're going to see that there are several different types of depression. Just off the top of my head, you can do seasonal depression, just depressive disorder, major depressive disorder, traumatic induced depressive disorder, bipolar disorder. Okay, so that's 5 that I just came up with off the top of my head, and I'm by no means an expert. So each one of those depression disorders, and due to the fact that it's very individual based, and the trauma that might have caused it, or now we know the genetic link that might be there, has to be considered when we're talking about different treatments for those depressions, because it does not all work the same. So we're talking, the first thing we need to do, the World Health has called for I'm sorry, the the World Health Organization and the University of New Mexico have called for doctors to start making sure that they are blood testing for the following diseases because they mimic depression symptoms. So if you're taking an antidepressant and you're not getting any better, it the best thing that you can do is have a meet and greet with your doctor and say, "Hey, did you test me for all these things?" And if they did not, please insist that they test you for them because it very well could be a physical problem that is causing you to have mental health disorder symptoms. Those following diseases are, and it's not limited to this. This is just the five or six top ones that I found: anemia, chronic fatigue syndrome, thyroid disorder, syphilis. And now, when I say syphilis, it is in the later stages. Okay, if you've had syphilis for a long time, that's when you're going to start having mental health disorders. um, Obstructive sleep apnea, Lyme disease, and neuroendocrine tremors syndrome. Those are the top six things that could be going on in your body that can cause symptoms that mimic depression and anxiety. So make sure you get to that appointment with your doctor and say, "Hey, did you test me for all this stuff? Is this something that I should be aware of?" The next thing they call to do is they call for a thorough family history. And when I say thorough, I mean complete and thorough, not just do you have a history of depression and anxiety in your family. It should be, do you have a history of all those six things that I just said to you? Do you have any of those in your family? Also, the other thing that people are overlooking greatly is addictions. So, addictions to drugs and alcohol are actually very commonly linked to depression symptoms. So, they should be asking you all of those questions. Do you have a history of this? Do you have a history of that? And what side's it on? Mom's, dad, how far apart? The thing is they stop asking questions once you go past your siblings. However, there have been some studies recently, again by the University of New Mexico, suggesting that we should even go as far as cousins because there are certain genes that are recessive, which we all know, but those genes come up and they, just like being a redhead and blue eyes are all recessive. Well, there's genes that come up that are recessive that can cause more depression and anxiety symptoms in a person, and you wouldn't know it if you didn't go to the effect of cousins in the genetic asking. So the other things that we need to do is we need to start with blood testing, and the blood testing should check for those types of diseases. The other thing that it needs to be checked for is you need to be checked for different markers in your blood tests. The one thing that we see a lot of, and it's been linked again by the World Health Organization, it's been linked to is lower phosphate levels in the blood have been linked to depression. Um, Studies have shown that mineral intake also affects your mental health. What I say by mental health, uh, what I say by like mineral intake, we're talking about zinc, copper, magnesium, iron, and micro minerals such as calcium, potassium, magnesium. If those levels are low in your body, those could be causing you to have mental health disorders or symptoms of a mental health disorder. One of the most common things that doctors diagnose as a problem or as a catch-all, especially in women, is you have a vitamin D deficiency. Well, a lot of women do have vitamin D deficiencies. Absolutely. I am one of those women who does. But they said, go sit out and make sure you're out in the sun for 15 to 20 minutes every day and you'll get enough vitamin D. Well, I did that and I took my vitamin D and my vitamin D level did come up, and that's fantastic. But I still had those symptoms. So by prescribing that to me, we cut off one avenue. So it wasn't just a vitamin D deficiency. I also have a mental health disorder. So do you see how, if we're going to be going hand in hand and we're going to be talking to our doctors about getting a more comprehensive diagnosis, we definitely have to be open to doing things that we think might be foolish, because sitting outside in the sun for 15 minutes a day at the time sounded really silly to me. Now, as a real grown up, it doesn't sound silly to me. In fact, I enjoy my 15 minutes when it's not 48 freaking degrees and windy in Oregon. I enjoy those days out in the sun. Um, so the other thing, when we're talking about that, we're also seeing that we're going to be have we're finding, we all knew this, we all knew all around there are genetic markers for depression because it runs in families, and different, bipolar runs in families, um, schizophrenia runs in families. All mental health disorders will find a genetic marker somewhere. Okay, there's something in your family that is running down your lines and triggering it. The problem was is we really had no idea up until about 5 years ago what could possibly be causing these things to run in families. And we've actually found now that the one of the biggest things that happens, especially with the depression, all forms of depression, is that we all knew this. We knew that there was some type of blockage. The chemicals being produced, getting to where they needed to be, there's a blockage. Well, they have now, not we, they have now figured out what exactly it is, and it blocked the norepinephrine, the cortisol, and the serotonin. It's not a low level of those things in the brain. Those things are produced naturally. The problem is that they sit at the neurotransmitters, and they can't be transmitted across to where your body can use them. So, for example, the cortisol, norepinephrine, and the serotonin, they all get dressed up and they're trying to go out to a club, right? And at the door stands the bouncer and the guy who has to let you into the club, okay? They're just not quite dressed right, not quite acting right, they're not quite appearing to be right, so they will not let them in the club. And in order for the body to use those chemicals, they have to get into the club. So, with those of us with depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders, our transmission system is what is off, and that's won't allow those chemicals to be used in the body. So, the other example I found was that, like, say, for example, we need 100 serotonin um, chemicals to be produced and transmitted over into our brain so we can use it, right? Well, in people with mental health disorders, only 5 or 6 of those serotonin are going to be able to be transmitted over. So we have 5 or 6 serotonin chemicals trying to do the job of 100. So you can see why we're going to be getting the depression, anxiety, and all the other feelings that we get with mental health disorders, because we just don't have enough supply to meet the demand. And I find it fascinating that it's taken us this much time to figure out it was a transportation problem, not an actual product problem. Kind of sounds like the US right now, just saying. um, the other thing that we're finding, and this is actually the one that just absolutely blew me away, was that we have actually found a genetic leak, a gene, an actual gene. Okay, the gene is called the CYP26 gene, and what it does, it affects the way the body can use some medications and can use them effectively. It affects drug metabolism. Well, those some of those drugs that are affected by this gene are ADHD drugs, depression drugs, anxiety drugs, and antipsychotics. So those 4 types of drugs have been absolutely linked with the CYP26 gene. If you have that gene, you're going to have to be very picky and really, with your doctor's help, to what kind of medications you try, because some of them are not going to be working to their full potential because your genes don't allow it. And that's all according to the National Library of Medicine. The It's super important. Now we see why we must go into the doctor's office and say, I want a full genetic makeup. I want a full genetic study. That is not something that they like to do for some everyday disorders like mental health. Okay, they usually do their genetic studies on patients they can't figure out what's wrong with them. well, we are patients too, and we deserve to have genetic studies done as well, because the it is that specific gene that you can link to. They'll have a whole list. Okay, this is this, you shouldn't use Lexapro, you shouldn't use Prozac, you shouldn't use this, and those are just made up, just names that I pulled out of my hat. But they will have a list of medications that are affected by this gene. If you have this gene, don't even bother with those medicines. Go on to other ones. And having that genetic makeup, that genetic rundown, is going to allow you the ability to bypass the insurance company's rule of you have to take 3 drugs before you can go on to one that's a little less common, or it's newer, or we don't have the research on it. Me personally, I'm on Prestige. And the reason I'm on Prestige is because I tried like 6 drugs prior, and none of them took me to where I needed to be, where I could have a happy place. I could be normal. Prestige has taken me to the point where I can actually feel like a normal human being again. And for a while, I had to pay out the wazoo for that medication because I didn't have a genetic study to back it up. Had I known all this earlier, I would have gotten that genetic study, 10, 15 years ago. But that's the way it works. You just have to flow with the times. Um, the other thing that we have found genetic wise, which is again super super fascinating to me, is that there is now a reduced amount they can find. They have found a in postmortem brains, okay, and in mice, but post-mortem human brains, they have found a reduced amount of the circular RNA, which is, I'm gonna slaughter the way this is pronounced, so I apologize. It's circa homer LA. Well, I don't understand that at all, but that's what it is. And this RNA is actually produced in the frontal cortex, and that is the area of the brain when they've done the postmortem autopsies. They have found a significant decreased level of this particular RNA, and this RNA diminishes the ability to change with their circumstances, with the circumstances. For example, you'll find that RNA is a lot like a conductor of an orchestra. Okay, the conductor conducts, the orchestra plays. If the conductor stops or stutters or pauses, the music is going to stop, stutter, or pause. So you will see in a lot of things like ADHD, especially, you will find that people are like, hold on, let me get my thoughts right. You'll find that also in bipolar disorder and in schizophrenia, where they have to stop and make their brain stop so they can get back on the track, the thought that they were on, so they can continue to have a conversation with people about what's happening and how the circumstances just changed in the room. There's also, again, like I have said, it is not it is not a mental health disorder. However, I see a really big link, and there's some suggestions now in research that is in its infancy. There's some huge suggestions that this RNA might be a link to autism. Can you imagine how exciting that would be? Because you'll see that because of the way autistic people, high functioning to low functioning to whatever it is, they behave in certain manners. And those certain manners are affected by the RNA. And higher functioning autistic people have a higher chance of developing mental health disorders because of, they don't know. But now they're suggesting that this RNA is going to prove valuable in maybe finding a reason for autism existing. Now, can we do anything about it? Not right now, but there's so much in the future that we might be able to do, something about it later on, which, the first step is research, right? Exactly. um and that came out of the University of New Mexico. There is now a study, and I encourage everyone who is listening. There's not many of us out here tonight, but I encourage anybody who's listening, or anybody who knows anyone who has depression and anxiety, to look up a study. It's the Juniper MDD study. They're taking in people now to be studied, and you can be compensated, whatever. They want to study the way things, what's happening in your body when you're on antidepressant medications and anxiety medications, to see how the body reacts and what's going on in the body. Because a lot of where we're having a shortcoming is in dealing with mental health disorders, is that you take the medication, you feel better, they go, okay, we'll just continue. But with what's happened with the WHO's call to action for mental health, they're now encouraging that we have to have follow up, we have to have testing, we have to have, you know, talk to your patients, let them know exactly what's available for them. You need to talk to a psychiatrist, okay? You need to talk to a therapist. You should actually be informed, and I mean completely informed, on the TMS option. Okay. There's so many different things that need to happen. You should have yearly, if not every 6 months, blood work to make sure everything's still within levels and that you haven't developed a physical disorder that is causing the worsening of your mental health disorders. Sounds like a heck of a lot. I know it's very overwhelming when you look at it from the point of, oh my God, I have all this stuff to remember. But it's like I've always said, you need to have a really good relationship with your doctor and your psychiatrist so that together you can do it. And that's the whole point of the WHO's call to action, is that they're like, this intervention should be happening on every level of healthcare and medicine. It should not be just the psychiatrist going in and saying, let's do this test, let's do that test, or, tell me about your life, that kind of stuff. It should be every level of medicine. And the thing is also, you have to make sure, and again, it falls on us as the patients, and that's unfortunate, but you have to make sure that those doctors have received our medical records, because you can't treat me for an ongoing condition if you have not seen my latest blood tests or my latest evaluation. You cannot treat me if you don't know how I reacted to several different medications. It's important that we be our own advocates, and it's tough, y'all. I ain't even gonna lie, it's totally tough. The other thing that I totally recommend is I totally recommend doing a research on your psychiatrist. Now, the reason I say this, because I didn't know then, but I do know now. The psychiatrist who diagnosed me with major depressive disorder, PTSD, and anxiety, his idea of a comprehensive evaluation was, do you take things personally, even though they're not meant personally? Yeah. Do you have a lot of friends? Yeah. Or do you have a lot of associates and very few friends? Well, yeah, that's more like it. And then he would say, the other one that got me is like, do you often make plans and you're excited about it, but at the last minute you're like, oh, I'd rather just stay at home? Like, yeah, that's totally me. He's like, yeah, so you have major depressive disorder. What was that? 6 questions? And all of a sudden now I have major depressive disorder. And Ox, I agree with you. Until much later in my life, I was diagnosed in my 20s, and I'm now 52. So much later in my life, I think it was more in my 40s, I became my own advocate. And I would make a list and I would go down the list. And I would never hand that list over to the doctor. I'd hand it to them. They could look at it and I said, please give me it back, so I could check off exactly everything I wanted to talk to them about. The other thing that I started doing, it maybe it will help you, Ox, I don't know, is I started bringing somebody with me. And when doctors say, oh, we can't have anybody else in the room, I'm like, no, that's incorrect. This person's my caregiver. So they're my sane person. They are the person who checks in on me and my mental health when I go, radio silent for a couple of days. So they need to be here and they need to be part of this evaluation just as much as I do. So when you put it that way, doctors have to respect the fact that you have an advocate with you. And technically, doctors can say we can't see you. If they say that to you and it was me, I would get up and walk out, because if they are like, no, we can't have them in here, because you have to be able to advocate for yourself. And there are times when people who have mental health disorders cannot advocate for themselves the way that they need to. And that's just a fact. It's nothing against anybody with mental health disorders. But if you ask my producer, 4 days ago, I was at the point where I couldn't even call him, and I talked to him every day. I was so sad and depressed. I just couldn't call. It was too much to talk on the phone. If it's too much to talk on the phone, then it's certainly going to be too much talking to the doctor. I wouldn't even talk to my husband. I'd just look at him and go, whatever. So they knew. So you have to really find what you're comfortable with, and have your advocacy there, no matter what it is. Like there was times when I would be on the phone with my daughter when she was in doctor's appointments. They're like, "Who's that?" They're like, "Oh, it's my mom." Um, okay. You know what? I absolutely 100% can understand that, Ox, because you never know who you can trust. And I also had trust issues because of mine was because of an abusive relationship. I didn't know who I could trust to tell them I'm having these crazy wild thoughts, and yeah, I think about suicide. Yeah, sometimes I think the world would be better off without me, but I don't have a plan, and that's a significant difference. But are you going to lock me up for 72 hours? And I told the doctor that one time, I really don't want to tell you what I'm thinking. And she asked me, she said, "Are you afraid that I'm going to lock you up?" I said, "Yes, I am." She goes, "Just tell me what's on your mind. If I feel there's a need to lock you up, then we're going to discuss it together, you, me, and your husband, and we're going to decide what the best plan is." She goes, "But I can't treat you if you don't tell me." And that's truth. If you don't tell them exactly what's going on, you can't expect to have proper treatment. And I know it's hard. It's so hard to open up and be vulnerable and to let a basically a stranger know that you're struggling mentally. And it is a difficult road to walk, but it is a necessary road for us to walk in order to get the appropriate type of healthcare that we need. And we really do, with all this research that we have and this advancement in the research of mental health disorders, we really do have a much brighter future laid out for us in the treatment of our illness, so that it will not be all consuming. And now it's pretty much all consuming, because you hope, I don't know what your guys' experience is, but I know that when I first got diagnosed, they just started throwing antidepressants at me left, right, backwards, and forward. Be on it for 6 weeks, come back and let me know how you feel. And I must have, like I said, I must have been on like six of them before I was like, I cannot do this anymore. You've got to find something else. And when they finally found the drug that I've been on now for 7 or 8 years, it made a huge difference in my life. It really did. So it's hard to just it's hard to do it's hard to be an advocate and be honest when they're just throwing stuff at you, treating like you don't really matter, because that's what I felt like. Okay, what's this say? Stuff. Yep. Oh, oh. That's awful. Oh my God, Ox, that is awful. Um, First off, I have to figure out how I feel about this. But first off, I have to say I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I'm so sorry that they felt that that was the appropriate way to handle what was going on with you. Um, and then secondly, this is like what the HOA was talking about. You gotta end the discrimination and the stigma, because they just assumed because you didn't want to talk to them, they spent put you in lockup for 20 days. And I'm assuming the turtle suit is like a straitjacket. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I'm assuming that it is. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So like that's old medicine. That is um old mental health medicine. And I really do feel, especially with the generation that we have brought up with our children, um being our advocates now, they're definitely advocating for a much softer, gentler, kinder world. And I think that that's going to really affect the way that we get mental health help, um, because they're not going to be throwing um, they're not going to be throwing stuff at us and just going, "Yeah, I hope it works. Here you go, suffer." That's just not the Oh wow, Ox. Well, maybe there is, and I do share the thought process that with we have these disorders and we have these problems for a reason. Absolutely, I do share that with you, Ox. I think that yeah, I think that a lot of my mental health disorders are a yeah, anti suicide jacket. Got it. Um, I think that we are made the way that we're supposed to be. I think you're correct in that. I absolutely do. And there's something I'm supposed to do with it, and there's probably something you're supposed to do with it, Ox. But that doesn't mean we have to be miserable and suffer. We live in a modern age where we can actually reach out and get help. Um, but again, that's a complete and total yeah. That's can you put Sandy's comment up, Beck? Um so the cells that they reserve for mental health disorders in jails are meant to be punishment to force compliance. That is absolutely 100% correct. It is correct. And that's one of the things that I was talking about, is that it is not acceptable to do that any longer. It's not that you didn't want to tell them, Ox, or you couldn't tell, you were refusing just to be an ass. There was a reason that you weren't telling them. There was a reason you're like, I just don't want to talk about it, you know? So they punished you for that, and that's exactly what it sounds like they did. They punished you for holding back or not telling them what they needed to hear in order to check all their boxes. And I'm so sorry for that. I really am. I'm sorry that somebody treated you like that, and that you were felt that you're lesser because you couldn't, you know, express yourself in a way that you felt comfortable with. I find that very disheartening. And oh, I'm sure, Sandy. I'm absolutely sure that they still do this, and they will continue to. I absolutely 100% believe that you are correct. But I think that this is the start of the era where we stop saying enough. We start saying enough is enough of that kind of bullshit, and we need to be treated like the human beings we are. Um, yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, so that's part of the like the World Health Organization's call to action is to absolutely stop this kind of treatment of mental health patients. 6 by 12 cold hard concrete steel, oh god, slit in the wall from the windows. Okay, that right there, being in that room for 20 days would give me fucking mental health disorders. Sorry, I shouldn't have swore, but that right there, that in itself will give me mental health disorders, and it will give any other person mental health disorders, because we are not meant to be solitary creatures. That kind of punishment is absolutely ludicrous, and it is actually inhumane. And that's just my opinion. Other people may have other opinions, but I believe that is inhumane. I believe that solitary confinement like that is absolutely inhumane. And especially if you're doing it to somebody who already has a mental health disorder, let's just go ahead and make it 10 times worse. And and now that person's never going to speak out and be trustworthy, because they were taught, if I tell the truth or if I refuse to relay certain aspects of my life, I'm going to be punished about it. I'm going to be punished for it. And that's not right. It's absolutely not right. And it's again, I really am hoping that the generation coming up behind me, like my kids' generation, they've started to make so many changes in the world. And I really think that we're on the cusp of making the world a whole lot better for people with mental health disorders, not only in finding that there's a cause, there's an absolute cause. We don't choose to be this way. I had a good friend of mine tell me a few days ago on Twitter that um, their grandmother said that if they wanted to get rid of their schizophrenia, all they had to do is write things down in a journal and pray to Jesus, and he would take it away. My good God, I can't remember people has in the past. Yeah, yeah, you're right. You absolutely don't. Yeah, you're absolutely 100% right, Ox. They are you're a number, and you're nothing but a number. And your being there provides them with X amount of dollars every fucking day from, whatever funding they get their funding from. I mean, whatever entity they get their funding from. And no, and that's absolutely correct, because that's the two places that, statistically speaking, you will find the highest concentration of people with mental health disorders is in jail and the homeless population. Those are the two places you will find the highest concentration of it. And it's not because they choose to be that way. They don't choose to be in jail, and they don't choose to be homeless. Okay, well, maybe some do, but very low amount choose to. They have a problem, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be treated. And doing what we're doing now is like shoving them under the most convenient blanket and just forgetting about them. That's not acceptable behavior any longer. It was never acceptable. It's just maybe as society as a whole probably accepted it, just because it's the, if I don't see it and it's not shoved in my face, I don't have to acknowledge that it exists. That is definitely mine. And that, again, that's the that's what I'm talking about, the changes that need to happen in our society as a whole. And it's starting with, and I'm excited about the fact that they're doing this kind of research search, so they can actually um find a cause and go, oh well, Jesus, okay, so it's not just this, they didn't choose to be this way, like the whole argument for me. Um it's the same argument I've been making for years and years and years. When people say, and I don't mean to offend anybody by putting myself in the same category as you, because I'm not gay, but I will tell you this is the argument I've been making, is that people have said for years, well, just try not being gay. You weren't born this way, you chose to be this way. And I look at them and I go, yeah, I'm going to choose to be discriminated against, hated, have hate crimes done against me, and make my life a general living hell for the rest of my fucking life. That is what I choose. And it's the same thing. I feel that same thing for mental health, people who have mental health disorders. We don't choose to be this way. Either things happen to us, or we were really literally born this way to make us have these issues. And for society just to push it aside and say, you don't matter, you don't exist, we don't want to talk about it, is no longer acceptable. And I think this generation is that, this generation of people coming up behind us are going to make that difference for us. Yes, that actually is a good point, Ox. And that is why I tell people all the time, you have to have a personal relationship with your doctor, because if you have a doctor um, who is uh, who is only in it for their bank account, only in it for their money, then yeah, they're not going to give you exactly what they're going to say is, okay, well, take this antidepressant because this particular pharmacy rep was here last week and they left a bunch of samples. Here you go. But the doctors are truly in it to be doctors and to care for people and care for human beings and make them better, are the ones that are going to absolutely be on your side and will listen to all of your concerns and will absolutely 100% be there for you and say, listen to your requests, because that's concerning. That's absolutely concerning that you can't find a Dr. Ox in your world, that is that way. That is concerning, and that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible, because you have to be able to have to be able to advocate for yourself, and have your doctor advocate for you as well, because otherwise you're not going to get better. You're just going to continue to struggle your entire life, and that's not acceptable. It's absolutely not acceptable. I'm so, Ox, I have so many questions. Um, I would love for you to drop me a line on my in my email. It's debbiesue70 at gmail.com. I would love to sit and talk to you and maybe have you on the show, because I would love to talk about the obstacles you have found in your path when you're trying to seek treatment for your mental health disorders. If that's something you're into, I would definitely love to have you on. I would love to talk to you about it, because I think it's important that we share both sides of the spectrum. With me being excited about research and the good things we're going to come up with, and then your experience of not even having somebody that you can turn to doctor wise that's going to believe you and not just try to throw you under the carpet and just go, you're done. Okay, well, that's good, Ox. But your story might actually encourage somebody who really needs the help to come forth and put in the fight that they need to fight. So just let me know. I just think that you have an interesting story, and I'd like to hear the whole gist of it. But so, oh, thank you, sir. Absolutely, thank you. I appreciate that very much. That's a very big compliment. I try very, very hard to be truthful and honest in everything that I say and put out on this podcast, because it's important. So we've talked about the research, so we're going to regroup, and we're going to talk about the remember that when we're going into we're just going to take a moment going into the holiday season and pull yourself, sit yourself down, and remember to regroup, reprioritize yourself, and remembering that the most important thing, you guys, and remind yourself the most important thing about the holiday season is that you are there, that's the that you being there in person and you being present in those holiday celebrations is the gift that everybody really wants. Don't burn yourself out trying to make the perfect dinner and the perfect atmosphere and the perfect party. Let's not do that, okay? Let's just be honest and happy that we're with our loved ones. And if we're not with our loved ones, make a FaceTime call and be with them that way. Because we have to remember that when we strive for perfection, we're always going to fall short because none of us are perfect. We're all infallible human beings who are struggling. And if you remember that and you remind yourself every day, be grateful. Every day, be grateful. I'm here. I got out of bed. That is a win. Remember that from the beginning of my show. I got out of bed today and it's a win. That's about all I did today, but that is a damn win. And I'm going to take credit for that win. I made my bed, I got dressed, and I went to work. Woohoo! I'm going to celebrate it. I am. And I'm going to treat myself like I matter. And when I say treating yourself like you matter, it's super, super important, you guys. It doesn't have to be something big or extravagant. It just has to be that you treated yourself like you matter. You know, um, buy yourself some new socks because your feet are cold. Buy yourself an extra Dr. Pepper or Diet Coke on the way to work. Buy yourself a new hat. Buy yourself a new shirt. Tell someone that they are lovely when you walk by them and they have this beautiful smile. And you say, wow, I just wanted to tell you that you have a beautiful smile. And looking at your smile made me smile today. That is a gift that we give to each other that is so much support because you never know the trauma or the feelings of another human being. You never know the challenges that each other are facing that particular day. So when we have a choice, we should always choose to be kind because we can make a difference in somebody's day. And if you make somebody smile, I guarantee that you're going to feel good about it. And it's a gift to yourself to let you know that your opinion mattered on that day. I make it a point to tell people when I think their outfit's cool. I saw these shoes today and I was like, damn, those are some really cute shoes. And I went and told them, I said, those are some really cute shoes. I really like those. They're like, well, thank you. And they smiled. So that's what I mean by reminding ourselves that going into the holiday season, it's not about perfection. It's about love. It's about family. And remember that family doesn't have to be blood. You can be family to somebody who you choose to be family to. And that for me is so important. It is so important. I have people in my life that I am not related to by blood, but I would actually turn my back on some of my blood members because of the way that they are to me and what they mean to me. And I'm not going to go out of my way to see blood family members who are mean and awful and nasty to me and make me feel like I am less than what I am. And that's the other part of, I'm so glad, Ox. That actually makes me smile too. I love doing that. The last part of the reminder is this, and it just went out of my head. Gosh darn it, I hate it when I do that. The last part of the reminder is that remember, who you choose to call family. You choose who you choose to interact with, and that is all based on your mental health because you are a priority. No one else takes higher priority in your life than you. Okay, I have children, I have a husband, I have dear friends, I have family, but I had to make myself a priority because otherwise I got lost in the shuffle and I would get caught up and into making everything so perfect. Everything has to look so perfect and everything has to be so perfect. I got to get the perfect Christmas picture with my family that um no, that's fine, Ox. People will talk. Um well, you know what? That is your call, Ox, but I'm used to people talking about me because I am just not one of those women who will go down in history for not speaking her mind. And I get talked about all the time. But it's fine, just whatever you're comfortable. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. Ox, and I get that. I do. It's a name that actually Beck and Ben gave me because I do have a tendency to try to mother people because that's my love language is to take care of other people, and that's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Um, yes, absolutely, Ox. You can't care for other people if you don't care for yourself. So please, please, absolutely remember to make yourself a priority this holiday season, and remember to check in, and remember to check in on those that that are having that have a hard time normally. The holiday seasons tends to be really rough on a lot of people. So just remember that. Just check in, say hi, how you doing. A message on an answering machine or a text over a phone can make a whole lot of difference in somebody's life. It really, really can. So on that note, y'all, I think I'm going to wrap it up for this evening. Oh, thank you, Beck. I think that I just want you guys to remember that there is a new dawn coming, and we are really going to see some great changes in the mental health care system. I really believe that, and I hope that it finds all of us before our time is done here. But in the meantime, please have a happy Thanksgiving. I will not. I won't be on again until after Thanksgiving. So please, stuff yourselves, smile, make great memories so you can talk about them tomorrow. And that will be a fantastic way for you to spend your holidays. And always remember you're perfect just the way you are. Love y'all.
A mental health disorder may be a part of who we are, but it is never all that we are. Sometimes you just need a hug. No words of advice, no outpouring of empathy. Just a hug. Be kind, be compassionate, and be good to one another.